The fact is, the civil rights struggle is over and it's won. At one time, Black Americans' constitutional guarantees weren't protected. Now they are. The triumph of the civil rights struggle doesn't mean there aren't serious major problems. What it does mean is that they are not civil rights problems and hence will not be solved through a civil rights agenda. Walter Williams, American economist and commentator. Welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. Today, I intend to upset, well, everyone. Earlier this week, Mayor Donna Deegan here in Jacksonville had a Confederate monument here removed, and that is the topic of passionate discussion. Now, I do have my opinions, and at some point I will present them. But my goal in this episode is to stir the pot in such a way that hopefully it brings people to the realization that we've all been duped. Our community is no better for having removed the monument, and our leaders have failed us. Now, if you think that places me firmly into the camp of keep 'em up, then prepare to be surprised. Joining me is former Libertarian candidate for City Council, Eric Parker. Let's bring Eric Parker in and start our chat. Eric, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Very well. You ready to stir it up and get ourselves canceled?
Yep. Let's stir the pot.
All right, let's stir the pot. So first and foremost, let me go ahead. Let's pull up a video clip here just to give people a little bit of a sense of what's going on, because I know not everybody is from Jacksonville that may be tuning in, that may be listening. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that we take care of that. So let me pull up that media clip here. Let's see, it's this one. Yeah, it's this one here. All right. So apologies here for not having it all set up. Trying to get this set up this morning, folks, was a tremendous task. I was really trying to hurry. I've got so much material to go through. Hopefully we get it all in an hour. It may extend over an hour. And it's my understanding, Eric, that you may have to step away because you've got some things going on at your house that may require your attention. So if he does have to leave, no worries, folks. The show will go on, and then he'll be back when he can. So anyway, let's play this audio clip here, or this media clip here. And this is just a quick news recap of what's going on here in Jacksonville. So let's see here. That's not what I wanted. How about that? There we are. Get this all worked out. All right, let's go.
The Confederate monument in Jacksonville Springfield Park is gone. Crews started the process during the overnight hours. The future of the statue has been up in the air for years until now. Tristan Hardy is on your side over at Springfield Park. He's been following the story since early this morning. So Tristan, people were up there as early as 2 a.m. to be witnessing this moment.
Absolutely. I mean, advocates who wanted to see the statue removed over here right behind me say they've been waiting for this moment for nearly a decade. And under the previous administration, former Mayor Lenny Curry, he promised that all the Confederate monuments will be out of Jacksonville. But his successor, Mayor Donna Deegan, followed through.
Na 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 na. Hey hey hey. Goodbye.
3 years ago,
Na 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 na.
promises were made.
Hey hey hey. Goodbye.
To remove this Confederate monument in Jacksonville's Springfield Park. Come on! And it's finally come to fruition.
They are not only righting a wrong, but it's a step on the right side of history.
For LaShonda Holloway, this is personal. So she brought her great-grandparents.
Jewel and John, my great-grandparents came to this park. They would come to this park. And then when they erected that statue, Black people stopped coming to this park.
Crews started working on the removal of this statue early Wednesday morning. People were already up, waiting to witness change. To some people, it's worth a celebration. While others don't find any joy in this.
I don't like this. I think it's dirty, and the mayor should be ashamed of herself.
Pat Greer believes removing the monument is unnecessary.
The history of that, I don't see the purpose of taking this down.
Mayor Donna Deegan's office says they were able to accomplish this through a public grant combined with private donors, costing nearly $190,000. Deegan says this is in part, quote, not in any way an attempt to erase history. To Holloway, the removing of the Confederate statue is progress.
So this is not just for me and my family. This is for children who are yet unborn.
And worth fighting for.
Now, we don't know what's going to happen to this Confederate monument, but again, I want to reiterate the reason why the mayor was able to execute this, according to city officials, is because no city money was used to remove the monument. We're live in Jacksonville. I'm Tristan Hardy, First Coast News, on your side.
All right. And there's the comment by the mayor. Short comment there. Symbols matter. They tell the world what we stand for and what we aspire to be by removing the Confederate monument. We can get into that in just a moment. First thoughts, Eric, about having the statue or the monument removed. It was more than just a statue.
And I think I've said this through my political campaign whenever I was running that I would have not voted to use any tax dollars to take down any monuments. But I also wouldn't have supported using tax dollars to keep them up either, or to preserve them or to protect them. I feel like a good libertarian stance is that, hey, if you want to memorialize whoever, you should do it on your own private property. And I think that's the issue, is our city gets in the I guess the mindset of owning property, not just a park with monuments on it, but football stadiums that cost the taxpayers upwards of, they're talking about using $500 million in taxpayers to preserve a football stadium. So I don't think it's wise for a city government to be in the mindset of owning property. I think they should be owning as little as possible. Let the private sector handle it.
Okay, fair enough. And so as a rule of thumb, I'm going to agree with you. I do believe that we should. So I'm going to take a little bit of different position here when it comes to monuments. I tend to see that as a local issue. Okay. And so on one hand, it's arguably the proper libertarian position to say no money, no taxpayer money should go for any kind of monuments to put them up or to take them down. And I'm going to generally agree with that. Now, we have in this country many things that are already up. So then the question becomes, like, should we maintain them? Now, I would argue in the current environment, we should at least maintain them, right? Because I don't want our city to have stuff and it fall and be decrepit and look ugly, right? So we should at least maintain what we have. Now, a lot of these kind of things were, a lot of these things are donated by people. So if you actually look into the history of some of these monuments, they're actually donated. I'll kind of get into that in a little bit here. So I generally agree with that. Now, do you take any issue with the continued maintenance of what is existing?
What is I'm not sure what is still existing, but I mean I agree that if the city is in control of something, that it's their responsibility to take care of it.
Okay.
But I think they should find ways to, for example, what are they going to do with this piece of land after the monuments are down? I was under the impression, and I could be wrong about this, maybe we need to do a deeper dive, but that this park was considered historical because of the monuments. That could be
Mhm.
wrong. But now that the monuments aren't there, is this park considered historical? Are they now able to sell this piece of property to a developer? I heard from someone that there used to be a natural gas plant on
Mhm.
this park and that the land's actually slightly toxic. There's probably not anyone that wants to purchase this piece of land that the park in the minority community was built on, toxic land. That's kind of a little crazy that, they would choose a piece of toxic land to build a park on. So, I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of moving parts here, but once again, if the city owns that piece of land, they probably should be maintaining it a little better than having like toxic chemicals bubbling up. Allegedly. Allegedly.
All right. So let's start digging in on some people. Let's start with the supporting side. Let's dig in on them. I'm sorry, those who are opposing the removal of these monuments. Okay. So the first clip I'm going to bring up is of Dean Black. Dean Black, for anybody that doesn't know, he is the chair of the local GOP here in Jacksonville, here in Duval, and then he's also the state district representative for District 15. So I want to put up something on the screen that he recently said. So let's get that back up here. All right, so this is Dean Black, and he says the unilateral decision to remove the Women of the Southland Memorial at Springfield Park is a stunning abuse of power by Mayor Deegan. This action, undertaken in the middle of the night during the holidays without consultation of city leaders or a vote by city council or by the council, is another in a long line of woke Democrats' obsession with cancel culture and tearing down history. Choosing to erase our history is not quote unquote brave. It is a cowardly act done by a lawless mayor who hides under the cover of night. We call on the city council to seek immediate accountability. The people of Jacksonville expect no less. What is your thought on what he had to say?
It's kind of hypocritical of the chair of the local GOP, Duval County GOP chair, to be calling out a mayor for tearing down a statue or for tearing down a statue in the middle of the night whenever the Republican mayor, Lenny Curry, did the same thing. And
Right.
he did it while using taxpayer dollars.
Correct.
And he did it without the approval of city council. So, and I mean, I'm not saying he shouldn't call out his opponents. That's his job as a political rival, is to, try to make his team look better than Team
Right.
Red look better than Team Blue. But he wasn't calling out a Republican mayor whenever he was doing the same thing.
Right.
So.
And I'm going to point out, like, for right now, at this moment, I don't believe it is an abuse of power. Now, for anybody that's not familiar, Mayor Deegan is a Democrat, Dean Black is a Republican, and Eric and I are libertarians. I don't believe this was an abuse of power. And the reason why is I look at it like when I see everybody criticizing, their argument is this is abuse. This is an abuse of power. Do you have some legal? Can you show me in the code, in the law where you have the authority to do this? And so, from my perspective, I don't look at it like you need to have explicit laws or ordinances or rules that say that you can do this. The first thing I look for is there something explicit that prohibits you from doing this? Now, the way that it works, the mayor can't just go and start spending a bunch of money. This was why raising the $187,000 privately was a way to achieve this, because she didn't have to seek out money from city council, and apparently, as far as I can tell, there is nothing that prohibits her from doing this action. So I'm like, well, it doesn't sound to me like an abuse of power, because nobody can point to where she's not permitted to do this. Right? Now, do you see it the same way, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that she went through her office of general counsel to find out if her actions were gonna, pass the constitutional muster. The irony of that is that her Donna Deegan's original choice for the office of general counsel was, I believe, Randy DeFore, a Republican, and Randy DeFore was actually opposed to taking down the statues. Well, the local Republican party leadership and establishment, if you will, chose to push Randy DeFore out of that position by not approving her going through committee and going through city council. They basically showed their hands and said, hey, we're not going to approve this, so you might as well resign your application, if you will, to the office of general counsel, and someone else needs to apply for that position. And I'm assuming someone else did, and they ended up being a Democrat. I'm not sure exactly who was chosen to be the officer of general counsel, but had the establishment Republicans not done that in the first place, they might have had someone that felt the same way about the statues as they did.
Right. And so I find that interesting. The other thing that I will point out, and I don't have any screenshots of it, but there were people that were complaining and they were saying, hey, this was supposed to be a decision by city council. And I know at one point I kind of chimed in and I said, well, maybe they should have made the decision then. Like they could have. They meet quite regularly, and they could have at any point said, all right, we need to deal with this. And it is a heavy Republican city council, so they could have said, let's get ahead of the game and let's make a decision, and then and we can go from there. And they chose to do nothing. Right, like there were, as far as I know, there were no votes, there was no significant discussion, there was nothing. Like they just were kicking the can down the street, presumably hoping that nothing would happen. Right, like they could just get away with not having to make a decision. Now, my interpretation of that is they felt like, hey, we want to leave these up, but they didn't have the nerve to be able to tell the citizens of this community that's what we intend to do. So I think it was kind of spineless on their part.
And former city councilman Al Ferraro of District 2, in the last city council sessions before, the new city council, because he's term limited out, he put in a bill to have the statue removal placed as a voters referendum, which means, like, I guess it's more like just a poll. Hey, how does our city feel about this? And Al Ferraro was a Republican, one of the more conservative, I guess you'd say, maybe closer to constitutional Republicans. Definitely one of the more fiscally conservative out of the bunch, which isn't saying much with this Jacksonville City Council. But he tried putting it forward, and it was voted down by the Republican supermajority city council. So we would have at least been able to have that conversation, you know what I mean? Or at least gauge where the city's at and how the majority of voters, not necessarily the majority of our city or the constituents, but the people that showed up to the ballot box to see how they felt. And it did get voted down by the Republicans.
Yep. And that's going to be a topic here coming up shortly, is, having this community conversation, because I've got some interesting media clips that I think people are probably not aware of, and they're going to be coming up here shortly. But I do want to point out, like I said, I'm being divisive this morning, and it's not with the community so much as it is with the leadership. And I'm going to point out, so Black community, if you're listening, I want you to really pay attention to this. Think back when people were putting laser lights, anti-Semitic messages, anti-Jew messages all over buildings. And I think it was just buildings, right? They had the CSX building and then also the stadium. They had messages that, were like, they had like a swastika in that one. And then I think the other one was like Kanye was right about the Jews or something like that, right? Well, do you remember what city council did? And I'm speaking to the Black community. I know Eric does. They quickly jumped on. They made a resolution. I think so in response to like Nazis protesting and all that, they put out a resolution condemning anti-Semitism. So they did that, I believe, on an emergency basis, because I believe that the way that city council works is they put things on the docket, and then there's a certain time frame under which things that are going to be discussed and voted on at a city council meeting, there's a deadline. And so if you want to do something after the deadline, then you have to kind of like do this like emergency type situation where you kind of expedite having this vote. And so they expedited this, and they got in front of cameras, and they were talking about it all over the place, and this was like most of them. And these were the Republicans. They had no problem jumping out in front of the cameras, and then they passed an ordinance in response to the laser lights, and limiting what laser lights could be. And while the ordinance itself was a little bit more generic, when they were in the media, they were all over like, hey, hate has no place. Jews, we want to protect them. We want to, stand in solidarity. And that's all fine. They jumped quickly to, to make peace, I guess, if you will, with the Jewish community. But then they dragged their feet when it came to making any decision with the Confederate statues. Now, I want to be very, very clear. This is not a black versus Jew situation now. This is a, hey, city council, you're not listening to us. You're not talking to us. You're not communicating. What are you doing? And I think that I think it would be wise for the black community to rise up with their voices and demand answers from city council in these kind of situations and say, hey, you need to hear what we're saying. If it's the case that the majority of the black community finds these kind of monuments offensive, then yes, you need to have your voices heard, and you should expect a similar response, or at least one that's not dragging on and on and on, which this one has. So, I just wanted to point that out, that, man, they were really quick, two laser lights, and man, they were passing ordinances. Confederate statues, this has been going on over a year now. Because I think Mayor Curry took down the first one in the middle of the night back in June of 2020. And we're in 2023. Now we're at the end of 2023, right? So this is, 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago that it's been going on, and they couldn't make a decision. Shame on them, right? I mean, am I wrong here, Eric?
I don't think you're wrong at all. It's good to point out like the lack of care whenever the cameras are off, coming from, both sides, Republican and Democrat. You know what I mean? It's very easy to get in front of the cameras whenever it's an issue that really all they care about is getting the votes from their base.
Right.
In my opinion.
Right. And look, I might say this repeatedly. Politicians are great at counting two things. Get my hand in the camera there. Two things: votes and money. They can count those very well. They can't seem to count anything else or do anything else very well, but they can sure as heck count votes and money. Right. And so this is the way. That's the path forward. Right? And I'm speaking to the black community, or any community for that matter. Like, this is the path forward. You need to put your money where your mouth is, and you need to make sure that you're voting in sufficient numbers such that they cannot ignore you. Because if politicians know that they won't get elected, they will do whatever they can. They have to get elected. And so, if you want answers, regardless of what that answer may be, then you have to raise your voice up, and you have to support the candidates that'll at least hear you out. And I'm gonna be hitting hard on one of these candidates here in a minute. Right now, we're talking about the supporters, those who support keeping the statues. So I want to bring up another media clip here, and this one comes from Brendan Leslie. And let's see, let's get that up on the screen here real quick. There we go. So Brendan Leslie, he said, he had said, hey, fascinating situation unfolding in Jacksonville. The Democrat mayor bypassed her city council and removed a monument in the middle of the night with private funding. Is that an abuse of power? And this is what I'm talking about, because I said, unless there's an explicit statute or limitation preventing Mayor Deegan from doing so, then the answer is no. Since everyone is pondering the question rather than pointing to something explicit, then it seems they know the answer. And then he did respond to me and he was like, well, I'm just asking, if there's an explicit statute. And I said, and I'm asking you, do you have something that you can point to that says she shouldn't have done it? And then he got all silent on me. So like, Brendan, if you're listening, I still want my answer. I mean, you want your answer, I want mine. So whatever. Who else is supporting keeping these up?
Are you asking me, like,
Yeah. Like,
people in the media? I
think
want to
it's just
say, I mean,
general people, right?
I don't know if there's a local organization. I know during the campaign they were trying to build or start a unity project where, hey, is there a way where we could preserve the statue on a private take it down but put it up on private property, or some sort of a Civil War museum or something like that. I mean, other than that, I don't really know if there's, I guess all of the Republican or majority of the Republican, I know Nick Howland, I think, might have came out and said
Yes. Yeah, he was
supported
critical.
keeping it up and this is an abuse of power. But I don't know if you noticed, Nick Howland has a press release every time they do something he doesn't like. He's the first person on the steps to start a newsreel, a highlight reel. So I bet he's trying to jockey for some political move here.
Right. Yeah. In a tweet, he said, and I don't know how, I'm not going to pull this up, but he said, Deegan is our mayor, not our monarch. Waiting until nightfall before taking a backhoe to the Women of the South Monument is blatant overreach. And again, I'm going to disagree with him. I don't think it is. And I think it's disingenuous to call her a monarch. I mean, either the mayor has authority to do something or they don't. End of story. And either you point to where they don't have it and say, hey, according to this statute, this ordinance, you don't have that authority. And then you can have that legal fight. Otherwise, he should be pointing at, it looks like Eric had to step away. Otherwise, then it's a matter of rallying the people and then making a decision in some other way. And again, I'm going to point to city council did not do what they were supposed to do. They drug their feet. So, you still with us or you got to go?
I'm here, but I have about 30 minutes. So
Okay. So we'll try to narrow this down to 30 minutes, and that's about my time frame anyway. So let's move on to some of the people that want to remove the statues, that are in favor of removing them, because I got some words for them as well. Let's see here. Where is that? So let's do this. So you're familiar with Representative Angie Nixon, are you not?
Yes, I am.
All right. So I had to dig at her. So let's pull that up on the screen and I'll read that. Oh goodness, that's so tiny. How are we going to see that? So let's see here. There we go. So she was all over the place, saying, hey, and then she's responding to Nick Howland, who's being very critical of the mayor. And she's like, hey, did you tell Lenny, our previous mayor, Lenny Curry, that? And then I said, did you praise Lenny Curry when he removed one in a similar fashion? And then she's like, well, I did. Next question. And then I'm like, so I did a search of her tweets and I said, where? Because I'm not finding it. And then she said, I have other social media accounts. Have an amazing new year. Okay. Like now we it was a relatively cordial, but tense, cause I'm pushing back a little bit, but the reality is, I don't think she did, because she didn't come with any receipts. She didn't say, yeah, I did actually right here. And this is the account. Like if you look on this account here, this is the one that she's got. Like you search her name and Lenny Curry's name, you're going to see lots of criticism for Lenny Curry. So from the same account that she was able to criticize Lenny Curry for, I don't see any praise and say, hey, you know what? By the way, Mr. Mayor, I'm glad you took that one down, all of our other beef aside. So, I'm calling out Representative Nixon because I think you're being dishonest. Now, I will eat my words if at some point I see evidence that she actually publicly did give him credit. But as far as I see it, this is simply just being evasive. And I told her so. I don't have that part of the tweet up, but I actually told her, I said, your evasiveness is duly noted. Let's get on to Jimmy Peluso, because I got some beef with this guy. I got quite a bit of beef with this fellow. Let's see, where is the media clip of him? So let's see here. This one is, I got my monitor kind of far away, so I'm looking to see. So I've got his statement here, and then, oh, let me put us back on the screen while I search for this. I've got a whole bunch of tabs open. Let me close some of these tabs. That might help out a little bit. So let's see, not that one. Where are you? You know what? Maybe I don't have it open. Let me go ahead and drop it in there really quickly. And then we will play this clip. There we go. All right. So let's share that one. And then we're going to bring that up on the screen. And let's hear. So this is Jimmy Peluso. He is 7. Is he 7?
I think District 7. Yeah, I think so.
City Council District 7. So this is Jimmy Peluso. He is on scene at the time. So let's hear what he has to say.
Right now I have Councilman Jimmy Peluso. He is here joining me live, and you came out here with a dozen people to watch this all unfold. How are you? What are you thinking right now?
I'm excited. This is a great day. I mean, you're hearing the cheering, the excitement's in the air. It really is a new day in Jacksonville. The mayor made this a major part of her platform. I made it a major part of my campaign platform as well. And look, we're doing what the community wanted us to do, and I think it's a great thing.
Can you touch on why they're taking this down and why they did this overnight?
Well, look.
Before daylight.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're taking it down because it's time, right? I mean, we need to heal as a city and a community. This is one step in a multi-step effort, I think, to make sure that we're really, recognizing the sins of our past and ways to fix it. History still exists. There's history books where you could read up all about the Confederacy. But you know what? We don't need racist iconography in our city anymore.
All right. So any first thoughts for you, Eric?
I'm not going to steal your thunder, but I feel like it is not necessarily true for us to say, look, we're doing what the community wants. Now, I could be wrong, but I feel like maybe they should have polled the people. Maybe they should have done a ballot referendum for, I guess, Springfield. Does it fall in District 7 now with the redrawing of the maps? I'm not sure. Right. But I would have done a poll in that district, do it on the regular ballot when they vote for city council, and ask, hey, how do y'all feel about the monuments in this park? Does this stop? Is this, and we're going to get into that in what the discussion really is. But I think what he really meant is, hey, look, we are doing what our Democratic base wants. You know what I mean? And that's true. I mean, you could, everybody, and assuming almost everyone in their party wanted them down. But is it the people in that community? And was that their number one concern? So
And I'll take issue with the whole healing. And again, I'm going to be getting into that a little bit more, but I don't think this is actually healing because all they're doing is they're appeasing one side of the debate. So we're not actually having a conversation. And to his point about it being racist iconography, that's actually not true. And in fact, as soon as I get done skewering him, maybe we'll dive into that exactly why, so that it's a little bit more clear, because I don't want to keep deferring and deferring and deferring. But I will point out, I made a comment. I made a comment online. I said, no group has more people that will fight for or against Confederate statues than white people. And I mean that in raw numbers, percentages, and per capita. Like, I started looking at a lot of the comments, and I just took a look at the profiles. It was like white person, white person, white person. And it's not to say that Black folk don't care about them. But when I talk to Black folk, without bringing up and asking explicitly, do you think that Confederate statues are racist? When I'm like, hey, tell me about your problems. What would make your life better? I don't hear any conversations about Confederate statues, right? The Confederate statue tends to be those who are activists, and when you ask somebody explicitly. But if I hear things like policing, redlining, what other issue? There's multiple issues related to policing, like how they police civil asset forfeiture. That kind of ties into the judicial system, those kind of things, so I think there are plenty of things that are affecting the Black community way more. And if we address them, we would see way more gains in the Black community than tearing the statues down. And, I'll point out this is kind of similar. Like, in fact, let me pull his comment up because he made an official statement. And so let me bring this up so that we can see this here. Because I think he's inaccurate on a few things. Now I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a whole page. I'll link to everything in the show notes so you can go read it yourself. But I do want to hit the highlighted part. He said since 1915, it stood in a park meant only to serve white patrons during the height of the Jim Crow era. I'm going to address that in a moment. It was erected as a symbol of white dominance and to intimidate Black and brown residents who challenged the status quo. Then we go down here and he says, the statue, a relic of a bygone era, hindered our city's ability to attract a talent, signaling an incongruity with our 21st century identity. I think that's total BS. And it was that we said the same thing. We heard the same thing in what was it, 2015, I think, or 2017, when we were looking to expand the Human Rights Ordinance. And people said the same thing. They said, the Human Rights Ordinance, which needs to include specific provisions for the protections for the LGBTQ community. We're not, businesses are refusing to come to Jacksonville because we're not passing this. And I said, well, wait a minute, which businesses? Nobody could tell me explicitly which business, right? Like nobody was giving me an actual answer. There were some people suggested, they were like, well, Amazon is one of them. So I did some research. And I found out that neighboring county, Hillsborough, they got an Amazon warehouse like a year prior to expanding their human rights ordinance. So, but again, nobody was pointing me to anything specific. There was no like media documentation. There was no quote from somebody from Amazon. There was none of that, right? And I think the same thing is at play here. Mr. Peluso is, like, oh, well, we're not able to attract talent. Okay, what talent has refused to come? And this is what we need. We need to have these kind of answers. And it's not just the white community, if you will, that needs this. The Black community needs this. And the reason is because if they accept these kind of statements without verification, then it's possible that they could be lied to and told that the situation is worse than it really is. And that is a disservice to the Black community. We cannot allow our elected officials, even if it sounds noble, to tell us lies, because the moment we do, we have no idea what else they're willing to lie about. Right. So I think that statement is full of BS and he needs to be called out for it. And then go ahead, because I got some more rants on him.
Well, I was going to say, wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, Jacksonville like the third fastest growing city between 2020 and 2021? Not just in the state, but I believe like in the United States. You know what I mean? Yeah. So
we've been growing.
Say like we had issue with bringing talent in. We were bringing people in by the droves, and I'm assuming if they can afford to move here, some of them, they got jobs and they're talented people. You know what I mean? Right. They probably were finding good jobs and good careers in the area, or, they're working remote. Either way, they sound like they're talented people to be moving to Jacksonville. So,
right. So I think that's BS. Now, I want to address one more thing, because he managed to show up at 6 a.m. for a monument removal. Well, Mr. Peluso, as it turns out, a friend of mine here in Jacksonville, he's an activist. He's with the Redlining Group, and he has a monthly meeting at a local church over on the north side. And he had been asking me to go for a while, and I couldn't make it because it was the first Wednesday of every month, which coincided with our Libertarian Party business meeting, which I have to attend because I'm the chair. So I have to be there. And then we switched our meeting to Thursdays. And so then I was able to start attending. And so I went to my first one last November, what was it? 1st? I think it was November 1st. Yeah, November 1st. It was a Wednesday night. So I show up and I found out that apparently they were expecting Councilman Peluso to attend, but he didn't. He sent his aide instead. And there were about 20, maybe 25 people there. And she was nice, no disrespect to her whatsoever. And initially, I had intended to be quiet. I was just going to listen. I was just there to support my friend, hear what they were up to. What kind of things that that were important to the Black community. The group. What's the name of the North Side Coalition? They were there, and there were some other smaller organizations that were also represented, and then just some general citizens who, felt that the meeting was important to have to talk about. So, um, so he was supposed to be there, and at one point, one of the women, she said, and she was a Black woman, she said, "We don't trust city council, none of you." And then, a bunch of people are like, yeah, 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 so then she continued on, and it got a little warm in there. It didn't get too heated or anything, but it got a little warm. And so at one point, I was like, you know what, I got a question actually. So I asked her, and I said, look, I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to kind of give a little pushback here. I said, just a few moments ago, a woman said, we don't trust city council, none of you. And I said, and it seems like there's a pretty strong agreement within the crowd. And I said, what is city council doing, or what is Mr. Peluso doing to help build that trust? And I said, before you answer, I want to point out that at the beginning of your speech, and I can't remember his aide's name at the moment, but at the beginning of her speech, I told her, I said, you pointed out that Mr. Peluso had intended to come, but at the last minute, the city council president had asked him to attend a meeting. And she said something to the effect of, hey, when your boss asks you to attend a meeting, you kind of do that. And so I told her, I said, city council president is not his boss. His boss is the people in that room, is the voting constituents. And he saw it fit to it at the last minute, right? So he had planned on being at a meeting, a local meeting with the Black community, right? He had planned on being there, and then he didn't even attend, but he could make it out to a monument removal at 6 in the morning, right? Like, and then he wants to tell us that, this is healing. Well, how is it healing when he can't even show up, you know? Because as far as I'm concerned, he should have kept his commitment. He should have said, look, Mr. President, I told these people, this group of people, that I would attend their meeting. I need to be there. And it would be inappropriate for me to tell them that I'm going to be there and then, at the last minute, not show up. And so to Mr. Peluso, I'm calling out your BS. And we're going to get into this whole iconography in a moment here, and whether it's truly racist. But I think first and foremost, what I heard was the Black community doesn't trust you. They don't trust any of the city council members. And then you couldn't even make it out to their meeting, right? But you managed to make it out and watch a monument and tell us all about how, this was a big part of your campaign. Well, most of what I heard didn't have much to do with the Confederate statues. And he would know that had he been there. Eric, what you got?
I think you pretty much covered it.
That's my rant. Audio. All right.
It was a good one.
So, I try, I do my best. So, because to me, I think we need to start calling all of these people out. Like, I think they're all, disingenuous, all of them. It doesn't matter whether they support it or oppose it. And I will give some credit to Mayor Deegan. Okay. I think that what she did was in a way a cop out. I think she took the easy path. It may not sound easy, but it's an easy path. I think that she should have fostered a better communication, with the city residents, because if we don't have that, we won't heal. We're not going to heal just by taking down a statue, because that's literally only one part of the community. And it's an important part. We need to address everyone. We need to have a conversation. And so I tend to be of the personal opinion that we are better off in most cases not taking down monuments. Some monuments, yes, there are some Confederate. I mean, I've seen some of the Confederate monuments where they literally have an inscription and they say, like, this is to the cause of white supremacy. Like, though, yes, I'm totally comfortable taking those down. But the reality is not all of them are necessarily racist, nor does it bring any kind of healing, because you're only appealing to one group. And in reality, I'm not even sure that you're appealing to the whole of the group, because you've got your activists and then you have your regular everyday citizens, and that goes for anything. It doesn't matter whether it's a white, black, Republican, Democrat. Your activists are an entirely different group of people than many of your regular citizens. But we're not having this conversation, and that is a bit of a problem for me. So I want to jump into
Well,
um,
real quick, I
yes,
would just say the only credit that I really give Mayor Deegan is
oh
doing
yeah,
this without the use
yes,
of taxpayer dollars. And look at the cost difference of doing business with government. I think whenever it was going to go through city council, it was going to cost 1.5 million,
mhm,
but by raising the money privately or through grants or nonprofits organizations, they were able to get it down to, I think, $185,000. So that's the cost of doing business with government, is the difference
right.
right there. With that, I think I have to dip out. I just saw I just got notified. So
Okay.
appreciate you having me on, and if I have time, I'll come back, but I don't think I will.
Okay. All right.
All right.
I'll keep an eye on you if you do come back.
All right.
Thank you for joining me, Eric. Have a good one.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. All right. So it is just me. Let's go ahead and start winding this down a little bit. It's going to take a few minutes because I've got some things to show you folks, because it's really important to me that we actually have a real conversation. So I've got some media. It's going to be a little bit time. I've got like a 4-minute video clip, and then I've got I've got something that I want to read you that I think will surprise a lot of people in some ways, not surprise you in other ways. So let's start. First and foremost, the reason that we need to have a conversation is because, as many critics have pointed out, this ends up being a never-ending situation. So let me put this up on the screen here so that you can see. This is something that I came across just recently. This is, somebody named Tango Jordan. Presumably he is in Jacksonville. I don't really know. He said, y'all, do this one next. Take him down, Jax. And then he's quoting somebody named Becca, who says, your vote made today possible, this one next. And this is the statue of Andrew Jackson that is in our somewhat the center of downtown, not quite the center of downtown, but it's in our downtown area. So when people say, hey, they're not going to stop, they're going to go for the next one and the next one and the next one, that's true. Hello, producer. My producer has joined me. Hey, buddy. Well, I'll be done in just a little bit. We'll go have some breakfast. All right. So it is not untrue that people do want to see the next one taken down and the next one taken down. This is the case. And then I want to point out what the North Side Coalition has said. So let me bring that up on the screen. This is a video. This is a video clip, and it's just a really short clip of kind of a quick statement that they.
The North Side Coalition, Jacksonville, they released a statement on this morning, saying about the takedown. This was around 6 a.m, saying, quote, we hope this is truly the end for that hateful monstrosity in Springfield Park that glorifies the Confederacy. When it is gone, there will be another ray of hope for a brand new day in Jacksonville. And we heard that cheering out there earlier this.
All right. And so again, what they're saying here is that, this hateful monstrosity in Springfield Park, it glorifies the Confederacy. Well, the question is, is it really racist iconography? And well, as it turns out, maybe not so much. Let's play something. So I'm going to play a clip of something you may or may not have heard of, a woman whose name is Christy Coleman. She is the former CEO of the American Civil War Museum. She's also a Black woman. And I'll link some videos that you can watch. I'm not going to play all the clips because it's just way too much. But I would encourage you to go in and listen to some of her talks. I'm going to try to play this short clip that I think summarizes it. So let's play that here. Oh, wait a minute. I got to pull it up on the screen, don't I? How about that? And let's get Christy Coleman over there. There we go. All right. So let's play this. This is a 4-minute clip.
No other city is more deeply entwined with the Civil War than Richmond, Virginia. Once the capital of the Confederacy, Richmond has more Confederate monuments than any other city. It's home to Monument Avenue, a shrine built for the rebels of the South. Well, now the city is trying to reconcile its past. The mayor wants the monuments removed, and he created a commission to help advise him on the future of the statues. And among their newly released recommendations, the statue of Confederate President Jefferson Davis must come down. One reason? He's not from Virginia. The remaining statues, they said, should include historical data to put them in context. One of the co-chairs of the commission is Christy Coleman, an African-American woman who is also the CEO of the Civil War Museum in Richmond.
History's always been a part of my world. My parents exposed us to it. We used to spend weekends at the Smithsonian when we lived in Washington. And then, of course, we moved to Williamsburg, Virginia, and history was all around us. One summer, I auditioned for a street actor job at the historic area, and that started this journey. Realistically, number one, there aren't very many women that do Civil War, and there certainly weren't women of color. It's been 10 years since I've been at the helm, but when I first got here, that was, I think, one of the headlines. African-American woman takes over Civil War Museum. I said, okay, here we go. Here we go. We wanted to elicit a response. We wanted people to see something that would strike them to their core, whether that is anger, whether that is confusion or chaos or rage. We wanted that in there. This war is not as simple as people would like to make it. And that's the part for me that I've grown to appreciate in ways I did not when I first came through the doors. One of the narratives at its core is this idea that somehow freedom was given versus earned. The North went to war to free the slaves. No mentioning or reality of the generations of African Americans that are freedom seekers themselves. No mention of the fact that 180,000 plus African American men, many of whom were formerly enslaved, take up arms themselves. The other one that we have to deal with is this idea of noble cause. And we have to remember there was a draft for both sides of the war at one point. And so this idea that everyone in the South were ardent Confederates is absolutely foolishness. We want our visitors to really understand that the Civil War, number one, wasn't inevitable, and there were no real turning points. It was 4 years of absolute chaos.
Don't let them keep destroying my children's Southern history.
If these statues are heritage, then your heritage is hate.
I don't think that people are willing to hear each other. They're so entrenched in their positioning that they're not willing to hear that there may be something that's a little different. And that's what we strive to do. I think what's happening is healthy for this community because the community is grappling with what it wants to value moving through the 21st century. Okay, so here is the Jeff Davis Monument. Frankly, when I look at the statues, they don't have the same power for me. I understand them and the environment in which these things were built. But for people who have a truly visceral, emotional reaction to all of this, you can't discount that either. If we can't understand this American crisis and trauma and how it all came together, we cannot be what we were intended to be. That's why it's important. That's why I still do what I do.
All right. So I want to just kind of mention before I play this next clip here, in a couple speeches that she gives, I think it's Ms. Coleman, she kind of takes the position that there are situations where a monument may be best to come down, and then other situations where it's better to erect a new monument to add to the conversation. And then in some cases, we leave a monument up as is. And then even in other cases, you may add context. So you may add a plaque that kind of describes what's going on. And the reason that she says this, the reason she takes this position, because like she said, there is no simple answer. It looks like Eric's back. I'm going to bring him up on the screen. There is no simple answer or position to take on the Civil War. It was an extremely complicated, chaotic 4 years, just like she said. And she points out, like, there was a draft on both sides. Both sides had a draft. That means there were some Confederate soldiers who might have otherwise not wanted to fight in the war and were forced to fight in the war. Which brings me to my next clip of Ms. Coleman. And just to kind of finish off this thought here before I go into this next clip, he takes this position of like a little bit, looking differently at the statues. And she says, look, it's not the case that all of these statues are necessarily racist. And this is why I took issue with the North Side Coalition and many other people who said, look, like Mr. Council Member Peluso, who said it's racist iconography. Well, we need to know a little bit more history. Why is it racist? In some cases, it is. There are monuments that do say things like dedicated to the white supremacy. But then there are other monuments that are actually dedicated to the dead. So let me pull up this clip here, because I think this is what I found the most amazing in watching like several hours of her talks. And again, I recommend that you look up Christy Coleman and you watch what she has to say. She doesn't necessarily she doesn't take the same position that you're going to see in the debates that we're having online and in social, in that politicians will take. So let's pull this clip up really quickly here, and we will give it a listen on why it is not, why not everything is necessarily racist.
How they wanted to remember him, this honored figure.
It starts a little early.
If we back up just a little bit, I think it's important to also understand that as the war is raging, a certain memorialization is happening during the course of the war regarding the dead. First, we have the establishment on the federal side. We have the establishment of national cemeteries in order to bury these tens of thousands of men who are losing their lives on the battlefield. And the Confederate States of America did not have a similar system. And unfortunately, what that meant is that too often, many of its deads had to languish in the field until someone could retrieve their bodies, or they lay in shallow graves. And there was outrage around this fact, but the women, mostly middle to upper class white women, organized themselves to rectify this situation. And that's where we get a lot of these memorial associations to rebury. And when they are reburying, they are building monolithic type monuments, but not necessarily depicting a particular person quite yet. That's why I said the erection of the Lee Monument becomes a significant piece.
Okay, so that's the end of that clip. So effectively, what I'm getting at here is that not everybody that was fighting in the war, wanted to be there, and we tend to honor our dead. It's a very common theme across civilizations is to honor the dead. And people wanted to honor the dead, but many of the dead lay dead in fields because there was no formal system to deal with the dead. And so, as Ms. Coleman points out, a lot of these monuments were dedicated to the men and the women, mostly men, who were dying, who may not have wanted to be there in the first place. So we don't have to argue about, who started the Civil War. Was it Northern aggression? Was it over slavery? Because right now we're talking about Confederate monuments. And in those same speeches, she goes on to say that her position is that communities put these up. So if you go back and you look in 1915, it was the Jacksonville community that put up this monument. And you look at other communities and they have similar things, right? They put them up. And so she says it's communities that need to have these conversations, and they need to decide, do we want to bring them down? Do we want to keep them up? Maybe we want to add an inscription. Maybe we want to add other monuments, right? And I know that for my libertarian peers, the idea of adding more monuments or adding to in any way means it generally means more taxpayer money. But as we saw, it doesn't have to be. So let me take a swipe at Eric. Do you recall who it was that provided the money? It was
90 Forward and the DuPont, the Jesse DuPont, I
Yeah,
think.
Jesse DuPont, that's what it was. And so my question then would be like, okay, you raised almost $200,000 to remove the statue, but how come you didn't raise that kind of money to honor any significant people here in Duval, right, or from Duval, or any significant people, maybe from the union or from the Black community that that could be memorialized, in conjunction with, to add more to the history. And this is my problem. We're not having a conversation. This is why I say our leaders are failing us. This is why I say that Mayor Deegan took the easy way out. She just removed it, and then we can all squabble about it online. But at the end of the day, we're not really healing. The Black community will not heal if there's a division from the white community for having taken them down. That's not how you heal, because now the white community is going to be bitter, and that bitterness doesn't end there, right? That it doesn't go away. That bitterness will come out at some point in some way, right? And so we're not actually healing as a community. And it's okay if we decide as a community, you know what? This statue no longer represents where we want to be. But that's a conversation that we need to have. And we're not having it. We're just arguing. We're fighting over it. And then you've got the winners now who are saying, well, how about the next one? And this is what I said. If winners write history, then there's no such thing as the quote unquote right side or wrong side of history. It's the winning side. And we all just believe that the winning side is also the moral side. Well, is it moral if you're dancing in celebration that you are able to get a statue or a monument down, and disregarding any potentially real earnest emotion from the other side? No, it is not moral. That is immoral. And that is exactly what critics of the monuments said were happening with the monuments when they were erected. They said, hey, during Reconstruction, during Jim Crow, these monuments were going up to spit in the eye of Black people. But that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it is, but not always. Sometimes people really just wanted to honor the dead. They want to honor something, a traumatic event in this country's history. So for me, I look at it and I say, absolutely no way. It is not, we are not better off from having removed this statue, but not because I wanted it up, because we didn't have the conversation and our leaders didn't facilitate it. All they did was do their normal job, taking a side and, creating further division. Ask yourself this: are there any people who wanted that statue up that feel better now, that feel relieved? Is any one of them going to come up and give those who wanted it down a hug? Will they be there for you when you need it? We are not a community in the sense that we need to be, because we did not have the conversation that we needed to have. Eric, I don't know where you tuned in. Do you have any comments on any of this at this point?
I want to say that whenever people from the left on Twitter argue, all right, next is the Andrew Jackson statue.
Mhm.
Well, you're giving, I guess, a little bit of legitimacy to what people on the right, people that wanted to keep these monuments up, were saying. If you went to any of the Jacksonville City Council meetings over the last 3 years, or maybe even before, in the public comments portions, you'd have people from both sides tear them down and keep them up. And the people that were saying keep them up is like, look, if we start here, it's a slippery slope to people wanting to rename Jacksonville, because it's named after Andrew Jackson, who, controversial president, but he apparently owned slaves. He fought in the Confederacy, that sort of thing. But he became president, United States president. Now, he was right about central banks. You should probably look up his history there. But if you already have people immediately after this one taken down, literally on the left, that were saying this one's next. And there's a picture of that Andrew Jackson statue that is in downtown Jacksonville, right by the water, right in front of where the landing used to be. So, and you know what I mean? Like, my argument, or all I really said to that, and it was kind of tongue in cheek, is like, hey, if we take that one down without taxpayer dollars, can we put up a small sign that says, but he was right about central banks? You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I mean, like, that's, you know, like, I'm not a keep them up guy as much as, you know, and I'm not a tear them down guy. Let's not continue to waste taxpayer dollars and government resources, which we all know the government doesn't have resources without using taxpayer money to get it. So,
Right. All right. Before we end, I want to read something to you folks. It's going to take me about 8 minutes or so. Because what I want to do is, Eric's a white guy. I'm Native American. So a lot of people might say, hey, you don't know what it's like to be black. And they're correct. They don't. But I can get an idea of what it was like at the time that the statue was built, or around the time that the statue was put up. And so I've dug up something. It is from it's called Changing Face of Jacksonville. And it's a 1984 article from the Florida Historical Quarterly, volume 62, number 4. The link will be in the show notes. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm only going to read excerpts. The whole thing was probably about 15, 20 pages, something like that. I mean, I took out some excerpts because it talks about what life was like between 1900 and 1910. And it seems to me that it represented fairly well. Like it didn't paint a rosy picture, but it didn't paint the bleakest. It seemed to kind of balance it out. So I thought it was kind of interesting. And then I'll have some final comments, and I'll give Eric a final comment after that. And then we'll just go ahead and close the show out. And I know it's going to be a little bit longer show than normal, but there was just like, and I had to pare it down, folks. There was a lot more media that I could have brought in. I was like, all right, like I gotta chill out. There's just too much to talk about here. But I think it's worth knowing, kind of like having a sense of what life was like in Jacksonville around the time that this monument was put up. So let me bring that up on the screen here. Nope, that's not it. How about there we go. All right. So I'm gonna make this. Can I make it a little bit bigger? There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna read these. I've got about 12 of these little slides. I'm just gonna read them out loud because you know, maybe somebody's just listening and they don't want to read all this on the tiny little screen or whatever. So almost done. My producer's like, "Hey, I'm hungry." All right. Jacksonville's population of 28,429 in 1900 made it Florida's largest city. By comparison with neighboring southeastern cities, however, it ranked behind Savannah, Charleston, Augusta, Atlanta, Birmingham, and Mobile. Jacksonville's 16,236 Afro-American residents comprised 57% of the population. Most Blacks lived in poverty on the fringe of the downtown area, with a large concentration in the Hansontown slum and smaller settlements in Oakland, La Villa, and Brooklyn. Black youngsters attended 7 segregated elementary schools. There were no public high schools open to them in 1900, but 4 private academies: Edward Waters College, Cookman Institute, Florida Baptist Academy, and Boylan Industrial School provided secondary education opportunities for a limited number of older youth. Edward Waters, Cookman, and Florida Baptist also trained clergy. Most adult Jacksonville Blacks did menial work, but a small middle class included 59 ministers, 41 public school teachers, 3 doctors, 2 lawyers, 1 dentist, and 176 mostly small businessmen and women operating boarding houses, barbershops, restaurants, retail groceries, meat markets, and dressmaking establishments. Skilled carpenters and a few others in the building trades belonged to local unions. In government, 2 city council members were elected from the predominantly Black 6th Ward. Beside the churches, Blacks belonged to 13 Black lodges, 7 Black Knights of Pythias lodges, and several mutual aid societies like Daughters of Gethsemane, Daughters of Israel, and Bethel Aid Society. In sum, Black Jacksonville, despite varying degrees of segregation, discrimination, and exclusion from voting, education, entertainment, and work opportunities, pursued a varied civic life reflecting the community's vitality. Probably the most familiar and traditional non-working Black institution was the church. In 1901, there were 59 Black churches, 24 white churches, and 1 synagogue in Jacksonville. 9 years later, there were 64 Black and 50 white churches and 2 synagogues. Black churches were almost evenly divided between Baptist and Methodist, with 1 Presbyterian and 1 Episcopal congregation, the latter added during the decade. Blacks celebrated special holidays in their churches, like Emancipation Day and Frederick Douglass's birthday. They welcomed visiting dignitaries, including Judge Robert H. Terrell from the District of Columbia Municipal Court and President Theodore Roosevelt. On a visit in 1905, the president spoke at Florida Baptist Academy, a school founded by Bethel Baptist Institutional Church, the oldest and wealthiest Black congregation in the city. The Black mortality rate, however, was almost twice that of whites, and the Jacksonville rate for both races was higher than the rest of the state. Black residents died more often from pneumonia, tuberculosis, and kidney and stomach diseases. They also suffered more typhoid. For most of the decade, Black deaths exceeded Black births. The causes of the greater sickness and deaths among Blacks were many, but health officials knew at least one. Hansontown, the largely poor Black community on the northwest fringe of downtown, had no sewers in its narrow, crooked, crowded streets. Instead, it had pools of stagnant water, overflowing privies, piles of garbage, an abundance of flies, and 3/4 of the typhoid fever cases. This condition did not change during the decade. Jacksonville's public school system also made limited progress during these years, but mainly for its white constituency. While enrollments rose and new schools were built, funding lagged and Black children received less than an equal share. The supervision of 4 superintendents fit a traditional mode. The modernization controversies taking place elsewhere in the nation seemed to have little effect on Jacksonville. In 1900, the Duval County Board of Public Instruction, under the chairmanship of Duncan Fletcher, supervised 8 white and 7 Black grammar schools, the all-white Duval High School downtown, and a number of 1-teacher Black or white schools in the rural areas. Youngsters attended school for less than 6 months during the year. Girls outnumbered boys of both races, especially in high school. The Black schools were disproportionately underfunded. For the 1906-1907 academic year, expenditures for 36 white schools came to just over $100,000 compared to $32,000 for 33 Black schools. 2 years later, the imbalance was greater, $107,000 to $31,000. Black male teacher salaries averaged $44 per month compared to white male salaries of $75. Black women earned $32, while white women received $50, reflecting both racial and sexual discrimination. Annual per pupil expenditures from 1905 to 1910 exceeded $20 for each white child and never reached $9 for each Black child. The schools began the decade with approximate parity in faculty-student ratios, but by the mid-decade, Black children and teachers worked in substantially more crowded classrooms than did whites. Despite the separate and unequal faculties in Jacksonville's school and libraries, Black residents took advantage of educational opportunities during the decade. One rough indicator of the times, the literacy rate, showed that the proportion of literate Black adults increased from 78.8% to 85.3% of the population during the decade. Yet, seen from the Black perspective, comprising 1/2 of the population, Jacksonville's changes appeared quite different. In many ways, they were regressive. Racial segregation was extended during the decade from schools, hospitals, theaters, and jails to saloons, streetcars, and even city government. In the 1880s, Black political power had been a reality in Jacksonville. The statewide poll tax of 1889 and the all-white primary in 1901 restricted it. But Black city council members were still represented the 6th Ward until 1907. That year, however, the Duval legislative delegation gerrymandered ward boundaries to guarantee only white representation. Subsequently, city officials began removing Blacks from all supervisory positions in government. Except for menial jobs, city employment became all white. Perhaps James Weldon Johnson best summed up the Black perspective on the changing direction of race relations in Jacksonville during that first decade of the 20th century when he wrote in his autobiography, long after the close of the Reconstruction period, Jacksonville was known far and wide as a good town for Negroes. Jacksonville today is 100% cracker town. Still, the Black experience was not all negative. As the city improved for white Jacksonville residents during these years, it also brought limited progress for Blacks. The literacy rate improved, mortality rates declined, and associated charities reached out, however timidly, providing services to the Black community. Lincoln Park, Manhattan Beach, and the Bijou and Globe theaters provided recreational opportunities for Blacks. There were new residential tracts being developed out Kings Road. Northern White Methodist supported the rebuilding of Cookman Institute, a new campus for the Boylan School, and the opening of Brewster Hospital. Linked with white support were Black initiatives. Black Baptist rebuilt Florida Baptist Academy, and Black Methodist began construction of the new Edward Waters campus. Black business activity expanded substantially. The number of Black barbers increased from 23 to 42. Retail grocers from 45 to 83. Tailors from 3 to 14. There were in 1910 7 saloons, 4 undertakers, 5 contractors, including Joseph H. Blodgett, 9 retail druggists, 7 real estate firms, and 3 insurance companies, including the Afro-American Life Insurance Company. The number of physicians increased from 3 to 15, lawyers from 2 to 8, bankers from 0 to 2, and dentists from 1 to 2. Overall, the 1910 City Directory listed 342 small businesses owned by Blacks, almost double the number listed 9 years earlier. There were also more churches and fraternal orders. Thus, despite segregation, disenfranchisement, and discrimination, Black Jacksonville had expanded its economic and cultural life during the decade. All right, Eric, any final thoughts before I give mine? I can't hear you, Eric. You on mute or something?
That was a lot of information. I didn't get to catch all of it because I was back and forth. But what I will say is it looks like there was still talent coming to Jacksonville back then.
Absolutely.
Fluso. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Things were getting better, and they still are getting better for all of Jacksonville, including the minority community, regardless of, segregation, disenfranchisement. So
right.
And it looks like a lot of those improvements happened because of organizations outside of the government decided to step in and work hand in hand with the minority community.
Yep. And so let me give you my impression of what I read, folks. Before the 1900s, the Black community in Jacksonville was on its way up. And as James Weldon Johnson pointed out, it was considered a good town for the Black community. It regressed in some ways between 1900 and 1910. But despite those regressions, despite all the things that were against the Black community, racism, segregation, discrimination, despite all of these things, the Black community still managed to make gains. Now, were they the gains they should have made? Probably not, but they were still gains. And I want you to ask yourself, if you're watching, is today a better situation? Are there more opportunities for members of the Black community? I would say yes. And I would point out that their high 80%, their 78 to mid 80% literacy rate was far better back then than it is now. And a lot of this was because the Black community got together with itself. They got together with the churches and they said, we are going to improve our community and we are going to engage. That doesn't mean that the white folk didn't do some bad things. They sure did. When they gerrymandered and they did other things that limited people. But those things aren't happening now. And so since I'm making everybody angry, let me tell the Black community, it's up to you to make a difference in your community. Tearing down a monument doesn't bring your literacy rate up. Tearing down a monument doesn't increase Black businesses. What increases Black businesses is the Black community gathering itself together and making it happen. And today, unlike the 1900s, there's a larger share of the white community that's willing to stand side by side. How do I know? Look at any of the video, any of the photos from the monument being removed. Look at who's making some of the loudest arguments. It's largely a white crowd. They're there. And all you need to do is say, we are going to do this. We are going to tackle this. We are going to hire. We're going to vote in council members who represent us. And when they don't show up to your meetings, vote them out. Get rid of them. Because if they can't commit to you, then they will never, if they can't commit to a meeting, then you can't expect that they will ever commit. No matter how much they put on display, no matter how many videos they do in the media, no matter what kind of flowery, flattering words they say, racist iconography, they're not there to really help you. So it's up to you, the Black community, to make a change. All right, Eric, I'm going to close out the show unless you got anything else.
Nope, I think you pretty much covered it. Thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure going over this topic. I feel like I learned a lot.
I hope everybody else did too. You can stick around backstage, Eric. But for me, I'm going to close this show out now because we are a little bit over schedule, but that is okay. That's what happens. Thank you everyone for watching. I do hope that you enjoyed the episode. You found it informative, even inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And then again on Sundays at 7 p.m. with my co-host, Susan Hogarth, to discuss LP happenings. Make sure that you're also subscribed to my YouTube channel at youtube.libertydad.com or Rumble at rumble.libertydad.com. Let me know how I'm doing by leaving a comment. I saw there were a good handful of comments today. I apologize that I did not get to any of them, but I will be reading through them. I always read through the comments, even if they come in after the stream is over. Remember, lastly, if you are a champion of liberty, then your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week, a happy new year. But for now,